to another edition of Life, Love, and Philosophy. This program is the 10th in a series of programs I've been doing on Ralph Waldo Emerson, the famous American wisdom writer. In recent programs, I've dealt with Emerson's views on religion. Today, I will provide some concluding comments on his views about religion. And then, since this is the last program in my series on Emerson, I'll conclude with some comments about his overall philosophy. I've mentioned that Emerson, despite the fact that he was an ordained Protestant minister for approximately 5 years, before becoming a world-renowned lecturer and essayist, Emerson became a persistent critic of organized religion, but nevertheless was a very spiritual person, and some would say, in his own way, a very religious person. Emerson concluded that he did not need formal religion to live a moral, fulfilling life. Henry David Thoreau, Emerson's best friend, came to the same conclusion for himself. What is interesting, though, is that both Emerson and Thoreau had a passionate interest in religion. Indeed, both were students of comparative religion. Both had read the holy books of the major religions of the world. Indeed, at one time in the 1840s, both Thoreau and Emerson collaborated on a series of articles for a magazine entitled The Dial on various scriptures of the major religions. Emerson, since he had been an ordained Protestant minister, was, of course, very familiar with the Bible, and despite his criticisms of organized religion, did say that he did draw much inspiration from the Bible and from Jesus. But I must add that Emerson did not believe in a literal interpretation of the Bible. Both Emerson and Thoreau were also very interested in Chinese religions and philosophies. Both had a great interest in the philosophy of Confucius and the philosophy of Mencius. They found studying comparative religion to be a very valuable experience. In recent years, I also have attempted to become a student of comparative religion. And indeed, I have read, besides the Bible, the Hindu Bhagavad Gita and the Buddhist Dhammapada among the holy books of the major religions. And like Emerson and Thoreau, I have gained inspiration from all of these books and great insights from all of these books. By the way, besides studying the books I've already mentioned, I have also found another book particularly helpful, and that is a book entitled The Analects. The Analects is the best record we have of Confucius teachings. Again, the Analects, that's capital A-N-A-L-C-T-S. And I have found much inspiration and insight in Confucianism. I've mentioned in previous programs that there is an outstanding textbook on comparative religion, and is so easy to read that one can forget that it is a textbook. And I highly recommend it. It's a book you can buy at any good bookstore, and I'm sure the library has it. Again, the name of the book is The World's Illustrated Religions by Professor Huston Smith. Again, this is a book on comparative religion, a superb book on the various major religions of the world, entitled The World's Illustrated Religions by Huston Smith. Smith has taught at MIT, among other universities. Last week, playing the devil's advocate to Emerson and Thoreau, I raised the question, do people need organized religion? Remember, both Emerson and Thoreau believed people don't need organized religion. I suggested the possibility that many people need some kind of spiritual religious guidance. And I mentioned that Benjamin Franklin, although he himself was never a regular churchgoer, did believe that organized religion played a very important part in society, a very valuable role in society. Indeed, Franklin, a rather wealthy man towards the end of his life, contributed money to the building of certain churches in Philadelphia, as well as to the building of a synagogue. Also, besides the fact that it might be true, or I should say, besides the possibility that it might be true that organized religion can play a valuable role for many people, doesn't the very architecture of many churches, mosques, and temples provide some inspiration and help pitch people to higher levels of consciousness? I remember watching Joseph Campbell being interviewed by Bill Moyers many years ago, and Professor Campbell, who himself was not a participant in organized religion, said that when he went to France, he very much enjoyed going to the cathedral at Chartres and sitting in one of the pews when there was no service in progress, because, he said, he derived such inspiration from just being in this beautiful cathedral that it helped pitch him to higher levels of awareness, to higher levels of consciousness. Emerson, as you recall, believed that there is no certainty in religion. Many historians have picked up on this theme, and many of them claim that at the very least, certainty in religion has incited much cruelty in the world, and at its very worst, certainty in religion has proved murderous. Allow me some examples from various religions, beginning with the Catholic Church. Perhaps the darkest time for the Catholic Church, retrospectively, was the time of the Religious Inquisition, when the Catholic Church set up religious courts to ferret out heretics. And what was the punishment that the Catholic Church condoned for people who were proved to be heretics by these Catholic courts? Well, the punishment was that the person was burned alive and burned to death. It should also be added that so often these burnings were public spectacles, even entertainment for many people, crude entertainment to say the least. And I should also add that these Catholic courts, the Inquisition, did not allow the accused a lawyer, and that the accused was presumed guilty and had to prove his or her innocence. Another example of certainty causing real problems, religious certainty causing real problems, is the case of Galileo. We know that Galileo was a 17th century scientist whose findings, some of whose findings, contradicted Christian teachings. For example, Galileo concluded that the earth was not the center of the universe and that the earth moved. The Catholic Church claimed that the earth didn't move and that the earth was the center of the universe. The Catholic Church put Galileo on trial for his scientific beliefs and found him guilty. And indeed, Galileo was forced to recant his beliefs. Historians say that he perhaps feared that he too would be burned to death for his so-called heretical beliefs. And what method did the Catholic Church use to prove that Galileo was wrong in saying that the earth revolved around the sun and that the earth was not the center of the universe? Ideas which we now know are correct. Well, the church pointed to the Bible. Indeed, lawyers for the church quoted from the Bible, indicating that the Bible is very clear on the subject of the earth and it's not moving and it being the center of the universe. So here again is a case of religious certainty causing problems and actually impeding progress in science for some time. And one other instance that bears mentioning, again, religious certainty causing cruelty, and that is the Catholic Church, at the very least tolerated, at the worst promoted anti-Semitism over the centuries. The idea was the Catholic religion was the only true religion. The Jewish religion was a false religion, and according to some Catholics, the Jews were Christ killers. And these thoughts were used as evidence that the Jews could be treated differently from other people, and therefore Jews often suffered persecution at the hands of Catholics and Protestants as well. We know that it wasn't unusual that Jews were restricted to living in certain neighborhoods of cities called ghettos, and that they couldn't own property, and very often Jews were not allowed to pursue certain occupations. And of course, we know this anti-Semitism, which occurred over many centuries, culminated in the Nazi Holocaust of the 20th century, in which more than 6 million Jews perished at the hands of the Nazis. And now for some comments concerning Protestant churches over the centuries and how their certainty has sometimes caused cruelty and at other times even caused people to be killed. Protestant churches also, at least many of them over the centuries have been anti-Semitic. In fact, the first Protestant, Martin Luther, who had been a Catholic monk and protested certain policies of the church and eventually established his own religion known as Lutheranism, Martin Luther, sad to say, despite the fact he did some very positive things in his life, was an anti-Semite. England, a Protestant country, in the 13th century, expelled all Jews and told them never to return from England, and if they did, that they would be put to death. Again, an example of Protestant hostility towards Jews. And of course, Protestant anti-Semitism, like Catholic anti-Semitism, contributed to the Nazi Holocaust of the 20th century. We know that almost all Germans, when Hitler ruled Germany, were either Catholics or Protestants. More than 90% of the population of Nazi Germany was Christian. Another example of Protestantism causing some cruelty, more than little cruelty over the centuries, concerns the United States. I've mentioned in previous programs that almost all slaveholders in the United States were Protestant. I've also mentioned that the majority of Protestant ministers in the southern part of the United States condoned slavery and looked to the Bible for evidence, in fact, cited biblical passages as evidence that, that God approved of slavery. Indeed, it was very dangerous in the southern part of the United States at one time to question the Christians' certainty that God approved of slavery. Lincoln, of course, did question that idea, and some would say paid with his life. We also know that at one time Catholics and Protestants killed each other. We know there were religious wars in France and in Germany, in which the Catholics were convinced that their religion was the true religion. Protestants were convinced their religion was the true religion. Each religion was concerned that the other was polluting the social environment with untruths, and it was not unusual in 16th and 17th century Germany and France for Catholics and Protestants to kill each other. Perhaps the most well-known example of this is referred to as St. Bartholomew's Day in France. St. Bartholomew's Day occurred on August 24th, 1572 in Paris. On that day, 10,000 Protestants were killed in Paris by Catholics. Again, 10,000 Protestants killed in one day in Paris by Catholics on August 24th, 1572. One of Emerson's favorite ministers was a man named Theodore Parker, who today is pretty famous in some circles. Parker, like Emerson, was a critic of organized religion, despite the fact he was a Unitarian minister. Parker talked about the use and misuse of the Bible. Again, the use and misuse of the Bible. And he said this, and I'm quoting him, "The use men have made of the Bible, they have subordinated reason, conscience, and religion to it." People have subordinated reason, conscience, and religion to it. I don't want this program to be a program in which I just talk about Christians and their intolerance over the centuries and how it caused cruelty and even death. Let me cite some examples from other religions. We know that Islam today has its problems, Iraq being an example. We know that Shiites and Sunnis are both groups are Muslims, but disagree on some of the things they claim Muhammad taught. And we know that these Muslim groups in Iraq during the last few years have been known to persecute each other and even kill each other. Again, because each of them feels they have the truth about what Muhammad taught. We also know that in Islam, it has not been unusual for some imams, these are Muslim clergymen, to issue fatwas. And what are fatwas? Well, these are orders calling for the killing of certain people whom the imams believe are promoting heretical beliefs about Islam and Muslims in general. You recall, many years ago, one of the imams issued a fatwa against the writer Salman Rushdie, calling for Muslims to kill him. And Rushdie had to live with bodyguards for many years, and as far as I know, he may still be living with bodyguards. Another example comes from Hinduism. Hindus also, over the centuries, have proved intolerant towards certain groups. The Hindu religion has condoned what is known as the caste system in India. And what is the caste system? The caste system is a social economic system whereby some people are discriminated against, where Hinduism and this system which it condones allows discrimination against certain people, particularly the untouchables. The untouchables over the centuries in India have been people who have been at the bottom of the social order. They do the most menial jobs. They live in the most unpleasant areas, at least traditionally have lived in the most unpleasant areas of Indian villages. Gandhi was very much an opponent of the caste system. He believed it was very unfair to discriminate against people because they were born into this class known as untouchables. And Gandhi, who himself was a Hindu, Gandhi criticized his religion, criticized Hinduism for condoning this idea of the caste system, this social class system, and particularly attacked Hinduism, criticized Hinduism for allowing the discrimination that it did allow towards, again, these people called untouchables. Today, the situation in India has changed somewhat. The status of untouchables has improved. There's no question about that, but there is still some discrimination. Also, giving an example from Judaism. Today, some Jewish people in Israel, and I emphasize the word some Jewish people in Israel, are convinced that God, in the Bible, granted Jews every inch of all the territory they are now ruling in the Middle East, and that Jews should not give up even a square inch of territory in any effort to bring about peace with the Palestinians. Again, the certainty of some Jews that God has granted them every inch of land they now control in the Middle East. And some would say this is interfering with any effort to bring about peace in the Middle East. Emerson claimed, and I'm quoting him, "The centuries are conspirators against the sanity and authority of the soul." Remember, Emerson believed that most people are neither very moral nor very wise. It is interesting that historians tell us that it has been the so-called normal, average men who have laid waste to the world over the centuries, who have killed in the name of God and religion, and who have enslaved other human beings. Perhaps it was this knowledge that caused Emerson to write the following sentence, which is very provocative and might be troubling to some people. Again, I'm quoting Emerson. "The people are to be taken in very small doses. If solitude is proud, so is society vulgar." According to Emerson, what's the proper attitude towards the masses of people? Again, what was his opinion as to what should be the proper attitude towards the masses of people? Well, Emerson believed one should maintain one's independence from them because he believed the majority is usually wrong, but he did very much believe that we must have compassion for all people and we must be committed to treating all people fairly. Emerson very much believed in the biblical maxim to treat others the way we wish to be treated. If there is a single theme that runs through virtually all of Emerson's writings, it's the theme of self-reliance. Indeed, self-reliance is the title of what is perhaps Emerson's most famous essay. And among the things Emerson meant by self-reliance were the following. Emerson believed it's so important that we think for ourselves and that we learn to think critically. In other words, we should rely on ourselves and not on other people to think for us. Emerson saw society and organized religion as often being obstacles to clear thinking. Let me say that again. Emerson saw society and organized religion as often being obstacles to clear thinking. Indeed, he said the following, and I'm quoting him, "Society everywhere is in conspiracy against the manhood of every one of its members. The virtue in most request is conformity. Self-reliance is its aversion." And then, of course, he went on to utter what is perhaps the most famous quote from him, Whoso would be a man must be a nonconformist. Emerson believed that society scares us away from self-trust. Emerson believed that society pressures people to conform. Again, his own words. For nonconformity, the world whips you with its displeasure. But he went on to say, "But the sour faces of the multitude, like their sweet faces, have no deep cause and are put on or off as the wind blows or as a newspaper directs." Emerson believed we will pay a price for our nonconformity, but he believed we will pay a greater price for conforming too much. And the price we would pay would be a loss of our integrity. One of the important questions that Emerson's writings raise for each of us is this: how much should each of us conform? Emerson believed we should not obsess about what other people think of us. Again, his own words, "My life is for itself and not for a spectacle." He also said the best advice anyone ever gave him was the following, and I'm quoting him, Always do what you are afraid to do. How did Emerson express his concern for humanity? Well, I've mentioned years before Lincoln opposed slavery, Emerson was making speeches calling for the abolition of slavery. Also, Emerson opposed the unfair treatment of Indians and became an advocate for Indian rights. And also, Emerson was a spokesman for women's rights, was much chagrined that during his lifetime, for example, women were not allowed to vote. And I've mentioned that Emerson opposed the Mexican War, which he believed was a very immoral war. And today many historians agree with that opinion. I should point out that the majority of Emerson's contemporaries did not oppose any of these things, did not oppose slavery, did not oppose the unfair treatment of Indians. Emerson believed that so many of the things we do because of society's pressure, society's conditioning. And he believed that a greater self-reliance will bring about significant changes in our lives. Again, a greater self-reliance will bring about significant changes in our lives. His own words, "It is easy to see that a greater self-reliance must work a revolution in the relations of men, in their education, their religion, their modes of living, and their speculative views." Emerson concludes his essay on self-reliance with advice about how to achieve peace of mind. Again, how should each of us achieve peace of mind? He tells us, and I'm quoting him, "We will not find it in a political victory, or the recovery of a sick loved one, or in the return of an absent friend, or some other favorable event." He said this, and again I'm quoting him, "Nothing can bring you peace but yourself. Nothing can bring you peace but the triumph of principles." So Emerson is saying, in effect, if each of us wants greater peace of mind, the way to go about achieving greater peace of mind is trying to be a very decent, kind, fair human being. Finally, I'd like to close with a quotation from Henry David Thoreau. Thoreau claimed we are all artists, and in Walden he penned the following words: "To affect the quality of the day, that is the highest of arts."